When people imagine modern war, they picture missiles, tanks, and explosions. But the most dangerous moment in a conflict often happens before the first shot is fired. Suddenly, radar screens fill with targets that aren't there. Commands don't reach their units. Pilots hear voices that don't exist. At that point, the battle is already lost. Because Britain doesn't start wars by destroying the enemy, it starts by making the enemy blind, deaf, and confused. And that is exactly why NATO is paying very close attention. 23rd March 2023, Eastern Mediterranean, 300 miles south of Cyprus, 2 o'clock in the morning. A British aircraft flies through the darkness. RC-135W rivet joint. Registration ZZ666. RAF 51 Squadron, based at RAF Waddington, Lincolnshire. From the outside, it looks like a passenger plane, Boeing 707, old, unremarkable. The kind of aircraft you'd ignore at an airport. But inside, completely different. No passenger seats, no overhead bins, no flight attendants serving tea. Instead, 30 people sitting at computer consoles, screens everywhere, covering every wall, showing signals, frequencies, electromagnetic waves invisible to the human eye. Flight Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, 34 years old, electronic warfare officer, 12 years in the RAF, sits at her console. She's wearing headphones, listening. Not to music, to radio transmissions, specifically enemy radio transmissions. Below her, 400 miles away, a foreign military is conducting exercises, moving tanks, flying aircraft, testing air defense systems, all perfectly legal in international waters, in their own airspace. But they're broadcasting, radio communications, radar signals, data links. Everything electronic produces a signature, and Sarah is collecting every signature. She can hear tank commanders talking to headquarters, can see radar frequencies searching for threats, can identify which air defense system is where based on its electronic fingerprint. The foreign military doesn't know she's listening. The aircraft is too far away. Flying in international airspace, completely legal, breaking no laws, but gathering everything. Her commanding officer, Squadron Leader James Parker, walks past, looks at her screen, asks, "Anything interesting?" Sarah nods. "New radar system. Frequency suggests S400 variant. Deployed 20 kilometers from the coast. 3 units. Full coverage." Parker smiles. "Good work. Log everything. Intelligence will want details. This is happening right now. Not in films, not in fiction. Reality. This is what Britain does. Every day, every night. Quietly, invisibly. Collecting information that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. And most people have absolutely no idea this is happening. Let's step back, because most people, understandably, have no clue what electronic warfare actually means. So let's make it simple, really simple. Imagine you're playing football, but you're blindfolded, and your ears are plugged, and someone's shouting wrong instructions at you. Can you still play? Technically, yes, but you're going to lose. Badly. That's what electronic warfare does. It doesn't destroy the enemy, it makes the enemy unable to function. Modern militaries rely on electronics, completely. Radars to see aircraft, radios to communicate, GPS for navigation, data links for coordination. Everything is electronic. Take that away, the military becomes helpless. Example, simple as possible. An enemy fighter pilot is flying. He has a radar in his nose. That radar sends out radio waves. Those waves bounce off targets and return. The pilot sees you on his screen. But what if you could make his radar lie? What if his screen showed 10 aircraft when there's only 1? What if it showed aircraft left when they're actually right? What if it showed nothing when you're right in front of him? The pilot isn't stupid. His training is fine. His aircraft works perfectly. But his information is wrong. And in modern war, wrong information is worse than no information. Because wrong information makes you act stupidly. That's electronic warfare. Not destroying things, deceiving things. And Britain has spent decades becoming the absolute best at this. But why Britain? Why not America, or France, or anyone else? The answer goes back to World War II, to a moment when Britain invented something that changed everything. 1940. Germany is bombing Britain, the Blitz. Hundreds of German bombers flying over London, Liverpool, Coventry, everywhere. British fighters try to stop them. Spitfires, Hurricanes, brave pilots. But they can't find the bombers in the dark. Then Britain develops radar, radio detection and ranging, the ability to see aircraft using radio waves. Suddenly, British fighters know exactly where German bombers are, can intercept them, shoot them down. Germany realises radar is critical. They need it too. They build it. But then Britain does. Something genius. British scientists develop jamming. Equipment that broadcasts radio noise on the same frequency as German radar. The German radar screens fill with nonsense. Can't see anything. Completely useless. Germany tries to adapt, changes frequencies. Britain adapts faster. It becomes a race, a technological race. Who can deceive who better? And Britain, smaller than Germany, fewer resources, wins that race. Because British scientists are brilliant, and because Britain understands something fundamental. In war, information is more important than weapons. You can have the best tanks, the best aircraft, the best soldiers. But if you don't know where the enemy is, if your communications don't work, if your radars see ghosts, you lose. Britain learned that lesson in the 1940s and never forgot. Fast forward, 21st century. The technology has changed, massively. But the principle hasn't. Britain still leads electronic warfare, and here's how. First, the listening aircraft. That rivet joint we met earlier? Britain has 3 of them, purchased from America in 2013, operated by RAF 51 Squadron. These aircraft fly for 12 hours at a time, just circling, high altitude, international airspace, listening. What are they listening to? Everything. Military radios, civilian communications, radar emissions, satellite signals, mobile phones, Wi-Fi, every electronic transmission in range. The aircraft has 30 specialist operators on board, each monitoring different frequencies, different signals, different targets. And here's what's extraordinary. They're not just recording, they're analysing, in real time. Sarah Mitchell, the electronic warfare officer we met, can identify a specific radar model just by its signal, like recognising someone's voice on the phone, except with radar. She knows, this frequency pattern means S400, this one means Tor M2, this one means Pantsir S1. Why does this matter? Because if you know what radar the enemy has, you know its weaknesses, you know which direction it can't see, you know how to jam it, you know how to make your aircraft invisible to it. Example. Explained simply. Imagine you're playing hide and seek, and someone tells you exactly where the seeker is looking, and when they turn their head, and which direction they never look. You'd never get caught. Ever. That's what rivet joint does. It tells British forces exactly what the enemy can see, and more importantly, what they can't. Second, the Shadow aircraft. Britain has another aircraft most people have never heard of, Shadow R1. Looks like a small business jet, Beechcraft King Air. Completely ordinary, except it's not ordinary at all. Shadow R1 is a surveillance aircraft, but not the kind that takes photos, the kind that intercepts communications. It flies over conflict zones, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, listening to enemy radio transmissions, finding out who's talking to who, where commanders are located, what plans they're making. Britain has 5 of these aircraft, operated by 14 Squadron RAF based at RAF Waddington, and they're incredibly effective. Example from Syria, 2015. British Shadow aircraft flying over Syria, monitoring ISIS communications, intercepts a radio transmission. ISIS commander giving coordinates for a meeting, specific location, specific time. Shadow relays the information to British intelligence. Intelligence analyses, confirms it's genuine, passes to RAF strike aircraft. 30 minutes later, Typhoon drops Paveway 4 bomb on the meeting. ISIS commander eliminated. 0 British troops on the ground. 0 casualties. Just 1 aircraft listening, and acting on what it heard. That's the power of electronic warfare, not fighting directly, winning invisibly. Third, the jamming systems. This is where it gets really interesting. Britain doesn't just listen. Britain can broadcast, can send out signals that disrupt enemy systems. Typhoon aircraft with ECRS. Mark II radar, which we've discussed before, can jam enemy radars, powerfully, while remaining safely out of range. How it works. Simple explanation. Enemy has a surface-to-air missile system. That system uses radar to track aircraft. The radar sends out radio waves. Those waves bounce off the aircraft and return. The system calculates where you are, fires a missile. But what if your aircraft could broadcast back, could send out a signal on the same frequency? A signal so powerful it drowns out the radar's real echo. The enemy radar would see nonsense. Multiple targets, false locations, nothing real. The missile system wouldn't know where to shoot, might fire at empty sky, might fire at a decoy, might not fire at all because it's too confused. And your aircraft safely strikes the target, returns home. The enemy never even saw you properly. This isn't science fiction. This is happening now. British Typhoons can do this, with ECRS Mark II, the most advanced radar in Europe. Fourth, the training. Electronic warfare isn't just equipment, it's people. Highly trained people who understand the electromagnetic spectrum better than almost anyone. RAF Waddington, in Lincolnshire, is the centre of British electronic warfare, home to 51 Squadron and the training school. Officers spend years learning, not just how to operate equipment, how to think like an electronic warfare specialist. They learn how every enemy radar works, how every communication system operates, how to identify signals in milliseconds, how to prioritise threats, how to deceive enemy sensors. It's like learning a language, except the language is invisible. Flight Lieutenant Mitchell, our electronic warfare officer, studied physics at university, then joined the RAF, then spent 3 years training specifically in electronic warfare. She can look at a radar signal, just a squiggly line on a screen, and tell you what radar it is, where it's located, what it's tracking, and how to defeat it. That knowledge is priceless. Absolutely priceless. Because equipment can be copied, purchased, stolen. But expertise? That takes decades to develop. And Britain has it. In abundance. Now let's talk about why NATO is alarmed. Positively alarmed. Because Britain's electronic warfare capabilities are so advanced that even America, with its massive defence budget, asks Britain for help. Example. Actually happened. 2021. RAF Typhoons deploy to Cyprus. Exercise with US Air Force F-35s. The F-35 is America's 5th generation stealth fighter. Cost $90 million each. Supposedly invisible to radar. British Typhoons use ECRS Mark II radar, the one with electronic warfare capabilities. During the exercise, they detect the F-35s, earlier than expected, at ranges the Americans didn't think possible. How? Because ECRS Mark II doesn't just look for aircraft reflections, it looks for everything. Electronic emissions, communications. Even the radar in the F-35's knows. American pilots were shocked. How did you see us? British pilots smiled. Trade secret. The Americans went back and wrote reports, analysed, tried to understand. Because if Britain can detect F-35s, what about adversaries? What about Russia? China? That exercise changed American thinking, made them realise electronic warfare isn't a supplement to air combat, it's central to it, and Britain is leading the way. But here's the most important question, the question every British taxpayer should ask. What does this cost, and is it worth it? Fair questions, deserve honest answers. Britain's electronic warfare programme, including rivet joint, Shadow R1, Typhoon radar upgrades, training, costs roughly £1 billion annually. Sounds like a lot, but context matters. Britain's total defence budget, £50 billion. Electronic warfare is 2% of that. For comparison, one aircraft carrier, £3 billion. One Type 45 destroyer, £1 billion. Electronic warfare for the entire RAF, £1 billion. It's actually remarkably cheap for what it delivers. Because electronic warfare doesn't just help Britain, it helps everyone Britain works with. When British Rivet Joint flies over Eastern Europe, monitoring Russian military activity, it shares information with NATO, with Poland, with Baltic states, with allies. When British electronic warfare officers train foreign pilots, which they do regularly, they're strengthening the entire alliance. Britain isn't just protecting itself, Britain is protecting Europe. And that's worth far more than £1 billion. Let me give you one final example, one that shows why this matters, why people who know nothing about defence should still care. 2022, February, Russia invades Ukraine. Within hours, Ukrainian air defences start shooting down Russian aircraft, way more than expected. Russia loses dozens of aircraft in the first week. How? Partly Ukrainian skill, partly Russian mistakes, but also Western intelligence. British rivet joint aircraft flying over international airspace near Ukraine, monitoring Russian communications, tracking Russian aircraft movements, identifying Russian radar positions. That information passed to Ukrainian forces, quickly, accurately. Result? Ukrainian air defences knew exactly where Russian aircraft were, could position systems optimally, could shoot with confidence. Did Britain fire weapons? No. Did Britain enter Ukrainian airspace? No. Did Britain violate any international law? No. But did Britain help Ukraine survive? Absolutely. By doing what Britain does best: listening, analysing, sharing. Electronic warfare, the invisible war, the war that saves lives by preventing fighting. So what should British people think when they hear about electronic warfare? First, pride. Britain leads this field. Not America, not France, Britain. Through decades of investment, brilliant scientists, dedicated operators. Second, security. Every day, British aircraft are monitoring threats, gathering intelligence, preparing defences, protecting everyone. Third, responsibility. Britain uses this power responsibly, for defence, for allies, never for aggression. Fourth, future. Electronic warfare will only become more important as everything becomes more connected, more digital, more dependent on electronics. Britain is ready, prepared, leading. Squadron Leader Parker, the commanding officer we met at the beginning, has flown on rivet joint missions for 8 years, seen the world from 40,000 feet, heard things most people can't imagine. Someone once asked him, "Don't you feel like a spy?" He thought carefully, then answered, "No, I feel like a guardian. We don't steal secrets for fun. We collect information to keep people safe, to prevent wars, to win wars quickly if they happen, with minimal casualties." That's the truth about electronic warfare. It's not glamorous. It's not exciting to watch. You can't make Hollywood films about people sitting at computer screens listening to radio, but it's vital, absolutely vital, and Britain does it better than almost anyone else on Earth. When people imagine modern war, they picture missiles, tanks, explosions. But the most dangerous moment, the moment that decides everything, happens before the first shot, when radar screens fill with targets that aren't there, when commands don't reach their units, when pilots hear voices that don't exist. At that point, the battle is already won, or lost. And Britain has spent 80 years, from World War II radar to ECRS Mark II, mastering the art of winning that battle. NATO isn't just paying attention, NATO is learning from Britain, adopting British techniques, British thinking, because Britain proved something fundamental. Information defeats weapons, deception defeats force, intelligence defeats violence. Every day, 30 British specialists sit in an aircraft over the Mediterranean, or the North Sea, or Eastern Europe, listening. Every day, British Typhoons fly with radars that can blind enemy defences, invisibly. Every day, Britain makes potential adversaries think twice, because attacking Britain means fighting an enemy who knows everything, sees everything, can turn your own technology against you. That's not arrogance, that's fact. Britain doesn't win wars by being biggest. Britain wins by being smartest. Not by destroying the enemy, by making the enemy destroy themselves. Not with noise, with silence. And every British citizen should know that, should remember that, should feel proud of that. Because when the world gets dangerous, when threats emerge, when wars loom, Britain doesn't panic. Britain listens, analyses, acts. Quietly, effectively, invisibly. And that is exactly why NATO is paying very close attention.